right, so anyone have anything they want to ask any of us here? Yeah.
For Chris, when you're dealing with something that is part historical fact and then part legend and part creative license, what percentage of each did you finally end up with in this final form?
That's interesting. When I first started, I started this idea for this with a book that was meant to be revealing a lot of historical information about the actual historical figure of John Henry. And there's a lot of information that sort of got pulled out of that and put into this play. But while writing it, I very much was looking towards historicity rather than history. So it was not whether or not the things here were factually true, but that they had a feel of being factually true. Because the fact of the matter is that John Henry as a historical figure ends up being less relevant than the many, many historical figures in similar positions that he's standing in for. So it's primarily a creative, it's primarily mostly its own thing that borrows from history when it needs to ground itself. So a small but real proportion is historical. Wardwell, for instance, was an actual warden in a prison in Virginia. C.E. James was the actual millionaire responsible for funding the C&O line and the cut to the Ohio mountains. But it's really not in any way an attempt to describe those actual people.
Anyone else have something they'd like to ask? Certainly have plenty of. Feel free.
I have one. How difficult was it for you to deal with those changes? I don't mean both ways, physically and emotionally.
Gets easier every night.
Mentally, I remember the first rehearsal where we actually put the chains on.
That's right.
And the first thing that it did was weigh down the legs. You think that you got average to above average strength and something like that wouldn't bother you. And then you got these big, heavy shackles and chains on your legs, and it's like, wow, I'm literally restricted. And then the way that functioned within the work was it gave true power to, it transferred power to these other men. Where when we were just doing it, it's like as an actor, you know the script, you know the story, it's like I have to be subservient to this situation, but the chains kind of made it so real. And to have that restriction, even like when you want to have certain dialogue, there's like a limit as to where you could even go within this space when the space is ours. When there's no guards, this is our space. And we're still restricted by what we can do with these heavy chains. So it definitely weighs you down mentally as well as physically and emotionally and psychologically, the whole thing. It's difficult. It's a difficult thing to get used to.
Yes, ma'am.
For those that were like the prisoners, and then you were the guard, how was that hard, like for you to transfer from being that like down, like being like talk down to maybe you talking down others? Like how was that? Was it hard to do that?
I approached it as like a form of assimilation. With my character, I really thought of like what is his idea of freedom? Like what's his idea of freedom when he finally died and he was wrong? What was his idea of freedom? Is assimilating into a guard and becoming what he most despised, and inflicting pain on where he came from or what he used to be. So like that's how I really approached it. So I kind of like reversed the character almost like into a different circumstance.
It's just basically just saying, well, now my character, he was the hopeful one in that he thought he would eventually go home until John schools him and says, listen, man, you're not going home. So now when he becomes this guard, he's saying basically to this prisoner, you're here for the duration, no matter what you do or where you try to go. And, one false move, you're going to get whipped.
Yes, ma'am.
When I don't know the character with the guitar, the name of the character?
Robert's name, right?
Robert?
Yeah.
Okay. When you were singing, I didn't know if your character from beginning to end was real or fictional, or were you a spirit? And even like
Question for me or something? My
I'm
character
just
works
curious
with the
if there is an answer to that, or how would you approach it? Because I couldn't quite tell if you were real or not.
I view my character as kind of like a supernatural independent contractor. I think that he is real in a real sense, you know. His supernatural relationship, like when he walks in that prison, I view him as not having done anything. He's there because he was sent there to write a song about John Henry, and that's what he's there to do. So when he walks in, that's why he's hostile. That's why he doesn't even like the guy, because that's why he's in jail. That's why he's in prison breaking up these rocks, and he really doesn't want to be there. So for the character, I think the character really is there, and I think that's why towards the end, he's impatient. It's like, basically, he's like, get your act together. You know, you run away, so I can write the song, and we could all be happy, choo, you know. So yeah. So at least that's my take on it.
You gonna chime in?
Yeah.
Mostly, yeah, he's a real character. There's a couple things that go on in the play. The thing with Laz too, where Laz is sometimes a ghost and then sometimes a guard. Part of it is that this is not a play in which a set of realistic events occur in order to as direct consequences of each other. A lot of the things that occur simultaneously, two things happening that are mutually exclusive of each other, and they're both true. It's true that Robert is a ghost from 40 years in the future,
That's
and also
because I was confused by that. Yeah.
but also true that he's real, and that confusion is, I don't want to say that it's the entire point, but it is part of the point that there's an ambiguity about a lot of these characters and about whether or not these characters are real, because in a way whether they're real doesn't really matter.
Right.
And actually, to support that, almost by accident, I know exactly what he's talking about, because you may recall right after Willie dies on the cot, it's obviously John Henry, Peter, and Robert up on the bunk. But Peter says to John Henry, I guess it's just me and you. And it's almost like we don't even pay attention to the fact that he's there. But then 60 seconds later, he's talking to me. So I completely connect with that.